They paved over my peace. I bought the land to escape. No noise, no neighbors, just a scraggly tree line, a dip of gully, and sunsets so quiet you could hear your own thoughts. I paid cash, got the deed recorded, even took out title insurance. Every inch was legally mine, marked by survey stakes and iron pins, described in metes and bounds only a surveyor could decode. I didn't need a mansion, just silence. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Then I left. A career opportunity overseas. Long-term, secure, and too good to pass up. I set the taxes to auto-pay, told a neighbor he could park his trailer near the edge, and flew across the ocean thinking everything was safe. It stayed that way, for a while, until the call came. My grandmother, the one who raised me when no one else would, was dying. She'd brushed off the cancer as old age until it was everywhere. I rushed home, slept on a pull-out couch at the hospice, and listened to her whisper in the dark. Don't let that land become a dream you're afraid to touch. 3 days later, she was gone. After the funeral, after the grief, I needed air. So I drove out to the land. I wasn't prepared. The road was paved. There were mailboxes, streetlights, a giant "Welcome to HOA" sign with landscaping rocks. And in the center of where my rectangle used to be, 4 finished homes, 2 under construction, a cul-de-sac where I used to park. Fences lined the properties. Sod was laid. Sprinklers were installed. There were no signs of my stakes or pins, just shiny homes and moving boxes. A man in a hard hat looked up from a clipboard. He asked which lot I was from. I told him I owned this land, all of it. He laughed, said it was part of Phase 1 of the new subdivision, told me to take it up with the HOA. They thought I was bluffing. They built their houses. They sold them. They called me a squatter. I let them keep building. And then I showed them the deed. Some people collect watches. Others collect shoes, stamps, or stories. I collected silence. That land, that quiet rectangle, was the first real thing I ever bought, just for myself. No mortgage, no split title, no one else's name on the paperwork. Just mine. $47,000 in savings, years of working overtime. I wanted something solid, something no one could take away. I found the listing late one night. One of those low-effort ads with terrible photos and a vague description. But something about the way it sat on the map grabbed me. A notch between 2 wooded parcels, no utilities, no improvements, no paved access, just raw earth. When I walked it the first time, I knew. It wasn't grand. Just enough land that you could wander from one edge to the other and not see another soul. There were hawks overhead, brittle branches underfoot, and a sunset that turned the entire sky molten orange behind the tree line. That was it. That was the moment. I had the title company double-check everything. The legal description wasn't easy. Bearings, degrees, distances from fixed iron pins set decades ago. One corner was described as 6 feet southwest of a split cedar post behind the Johnson barn, which no longer existed. But the title agent smiled, pulled out the plat map, and found every single marker. "You're good," he said. "Tight and clean." I bought it the next day. I remember driving home with the deed folded in my glove box, like it was a golden ticket. That night, I sat on the back steps of my apartment, drinking gas station coffee, grinning like a fool. My neighbors were arguing about laundry again, but I didn't hear them. In my head, I was already there, listening to crickets and wind instead of broken dryers and hallway shouting. No power, no plumbing, no problem. There was something pure about land that didn't need me. I wasn't planning to build right away. Maybe a cabin, maybe not. It felt good just knowing it was there. That if life ever got too loud, I could disappear into the silence. I walked the perimeter several times that first week. The corners were marked with tape and rebar, and I placed solar lights near the survey pins just to see them glow at dusk. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. Every morning I visited, I'd bring a thermos of coffee and sit on an old folding chair near the gully. That's where the sun came in the clearest, bouncing off the trunks of young oaks like they were pillars in some ancient cathedral. I put up a temporary no trespassing sign, marked the corners with bright tape and painted stakes. My neighbor, Jerry, said he'd keep an eye on it, and maybe park his fishing trailer near the edge if I didn't mind. I didn't. Jerry was good people, retired lineman, lived a mile down the road with a mangy golden retriever and a freezer full of venison. He was the kind of neighbor who still waved with his whole arm and told you how high the creek rose last spring. I set up automatic tax payments with the county and got copies of every document, even laminated a copy of the survey map, just in case. It felt a little paranoid, maybe, but I liked knowing everything was buttoned up. No loose ends, no mistakes. And then, just like that, life called. The assignment offer came with no warning. A job I'd once only dreamed of. Overseas, long-term, with housing, stipend, and promotion potential. It was the kind of opportunity people spend careers chasing. I had 3 weeks to decide, and I took 2. The land gave me peace of mind. It would wait. It had waited decades for someone to care about it. It could wait a little longer. I told Jerry where the extra keys were, gave him my contact info abroad, and asked him to text a photo once in a while. "No problem," he said. "This place doesn't change much." I walked it one last time the day before I flew out. Dried leaves rustled under my boots. A single deer bounded through the trees, startled but not afraid. I stood at the western edge, where the land dipped into the gully, and watched the sun fall behind the trees. I took a deep breath, smiled, and turned to go. That was the last time I saw it untouched. The move happened fast. I boxed up my life, stored what I didn't sell, and gave my apartment keys to a friend. My new position was in a city with clean streets, wide skies, and a government housing stipend that covered everything. I was halfway around the world, but in a weird way, I felt more grounded than ever. I worked long hours, reports, logistics, daily crises, the days blurred, but I slept well knowing my land was untouched, resting quietly under open skies. I pictured it often, the gully, the tree line, maybe a fox trotting through the brush. When work got heavy, I'd pull up a satellite view on my phone just to see it still there. Jerry kept in touch. Every few months, he'd text me a picture. The corner stake still in place, the grass grown tall, the trailer parked at the edge like a sentinel. "Still yours," he'd write. My overseas assignment became my whole life. New food, new culture, new routines. It wasn't easy, but it was rewarding. The kind of work that makes you feel like your boots matter. I didn't make many friends, but I didn't need many. I had a purpose, and I had peace of mind back home. Except peace has a short lease. It was a cold Tuesday when the call came. I was already tired, back-to-back meetings and a translation issue with a supplier, when my phone buzzed with a family contact, not one I heard from often. I answered in a hallway corner, and the voice on the other end was shaking. "It's Grandma. She's not doing well." Grandma wasn't the kind to complain. She called pain a passing ache, and thought checkups were for the bored. She had been brushing off symptoms for months, calling them just stiffness or a little indigestion. But it wasn't. It was cancer. Stage 4. The doctors said it had spread. She hadn't told anyone until it was too late. I was on a plane in less than 48 hours. I didn't go home first. I went straight to the hospice facility. She was in a small room with floral curtains and a window facing the parking lot. When I walked in, she smiled like she'd been expecting me, like she'd known I'd come the moment she called. There wasn't much to do. The nurses were kind. The hours were long. I slept on a pull-out couch and helped feed her when she had the strength. At night, when everything was still and the machines hummed, she'd talk, stories I'd heard before, some I hadn't. She was proud of me, of the job, the overseas adventure. But what she kept bringing up was the land. "That place," she whispered once, gripping my hand. "That's where you'll figure it all out. A place where you can hear yourself think." I cried more that week than I had in years. She made me promise not to wait too long to build something. "Don't let it sit there like a dream you're scared to touch," she said. "People go their whole lives without a place like that." She passed away 3 days later, peacefully. No struggle, just gone. After the funeral, I took a week. No emails, no plans. I stayed in her house, made coffee in her old percolator, and read letters she'd saved from me over the years. I boxed up her things slowly, carefully. I kept 3 things: her recipe box, the quilt she made when I graduated college, and a chipped ceramic mug that said, "Ask me about my grandkid." I thought about staying. I really did. I could have taken a stateside position, found something more local, but the overseas team was waiting, and I had unfinished work. There was also something selfish I wasn't proud of. I wasn't ready to sit still. Being home made everything feel heavier. The grief, the quiet, the reminders. So I said yes to the next assignment. Before I left, I drove out to the land. I didn't walk it, just sat in the car and watched the wind move through the branches. Everything looked the same. Peaceful, still. Jerry's trailer was there. My stakes were there. I nodded once, quietly, and turned the car around. The new assignment was in a different country. Hotter, drier, and more chaotic. But I adjusted quickly. The chaos helped. Work was non-stop. I dove into it, threw myself into spreadsheets, inspections, negotiations, anything to keep from thinking too hard. The city was different, loud, unpredictable. But it reminded me of why I bought the land in the first place. Every night, when I closed my eyes, I imagined myself walking the tree line, stepping over roots, hearing the echo of birds in the dusk. It became my mental anchor. Still, I checked in. Jerry kept sending photos. At one point, he told me a new road crew had been working down the way, widening the county road. Progress, he called it. But he said they hadn't touched your lot. "Still quiet," he wrote. "No one goes near it." That changed in late spring. Jerry sent fewer messages. I assumed he was busy or out of town. My work schedule was brutal. I didn't have time to worry. Until one day, I opened my inbox and found nothing. No photo, no message, just silence. Then came a postcard from the county. A generic notice about zoning changes in the area. I almost threw it away. The print was small, the wording vague. I remembered thinking, this probably doesn't even affect me. I wish I'd looked closer. Still, I didn't worry. Not yet. I had paid the taxes. I had the deed. I had everything in order. What could possibly go wrong? Grief doesn't come all at once. It seeps. At first, it was loud. The funeral, the visitors, the casseroles, the constant explanations. But then people go home, and you're left with the quiet. That's when it starts to echo. I stayed in her house for longer than I planned. It smelled like vanilla and old books. Her slippers were still under the armchair. Every time I passed the doorway, I half expected to hear her humming. I didn't cry much after the service. Not at first, but little things broke me. The empty tea tin, the sticky note on the fridge that said, "Buy creamer." The blanket she always kept folded just so, now rumpled and limp. Grief isn't tidy. It shows up in whispers. Not in breakdowns, but in glances. I wrapped myself in her quilt every night and made toast with her ancient toaster that always burned one side. And each morning, before doing anything else, I'd stare at the ceramic mug with the faded "Ask me about my grandkid" lettering. She always said that mug was magic, that it made every drink taste like love. Eventually, I started sorting her things, carefully, slowly. One drawer a day, I found notes she'd scribbled during her treatment. Remember, smile when they visit, and he's stronger than he knows. I couldn't tell if she meant my uncle or me, maybe both. Among her things was a photo. Not of family or friends, but of the land. It was the picture I had emailed her after I closed on the property. I'd forgotten I even sent it. She had printed it out and written in the bottom corner, "Your peace. Don't let it fade." That photo went straight into my passport wallet. The day before I flew out for the new overseas phase, I visited the land again. It was dusk. The gully held shadows. The tree line looked taller. I stood where the boundary pin was set, where the sun dipped low and turned everything gold. And I said her name out loud, just once. Then I got in the car and left. The new assignment was brutal. Different country, different pace. If the last one was about structure, this one was chaos. I lived out of a suitcase, moved cities twice, and worked 10-hour days without weekends. But it kept my mind quiet, and that was enough. Still, late at night, I'd pull out that photo from my wallet. I'd stare at the land and remember her words. Don't let it fade. I kept reminding myself that the property wasn't just dirt and trees, it was a promise, a vision, something pure. Jerry sent fewer updates during that time. At first, it was just timing. I figured he was busy or dealing with winter. Then, months passed with nothing but automated county tax receipts in my email inbox. That didn't worry me. I'd built in buffers. The taxes were still being paid. Nothing had bounced. In the legal world, that meant status quo. I'd learned enough overseas to understand how slowly things moved when no one was watching. Bureaucracies stalled, records waited in stacks. Nothing dramatic happens to land that no one touches. Or so I thought. There were signs I missed. A small county notice I received in the spring was one of them. It mentioned a minor plat revision in the township, something about parcel numbers being updated for development efficiency. It didn't mention my name or my lot. I barely skimmed it before deleting it. Looking back, that was the moment. That was when it started. Still, I had no idea. What I did have was momentum. The next phase of my job was even more demanding. I was in charge of a logistics rollout across 5 sites. I barely had time to eat, let alone dwell. But when I saw the land in my mind, I felt grounded. I saw it exactly how I left it. Wild, quiet, whole. After nearly 18 months abroad, I began to feel the wear. My contract was ending soon. The team was preparing for handoff. I started thinking about what came next. Not the next job, not the next country. I thought about the land, about building, about maybe finally doing something with it. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about her. Her voice in the dark telling me not to let it sit idle. She had believed in it when no one else had. I didn't want her voice to fade. So I made a plan. I booked return travel. I arranged to take a full month off before deciding on any new contract. I even started looking at prefab cabins and off-grid systems. The idea wasn't just to visit. It was to stay a while, to make something real. I texted Jerry the week before my flight. "Hey man, heading back soon? Let's grab a beer. No reply. That worried me. Not about the land, but about Jerry. He wasn't young. I hoped everything was okay. When the plane touched down and I finally got back to my place, the first thing I unpacked was the quilt. I laid it across the couch, poured coffee into the chipped mug, and pulled out the photo from my wallet. Still mine, I thought. Still safe. The next morning, I drove out to the land, and that's when everything changed. I woke up early, not from an alarm, from anticipation. I hadn't felt that particular kind of energy in a long time. Not work stress, not grief, just a strange combination of nerves and excitement. The land had been a dream on hold for almost 2 years. Now it was finally within reach again. The drive was quiet. Fog clung to the edges of the highway, and the sun hadn't yet burned through the mist. I passed familiar landmarks, the grain elevator, the faded gas station with a single pump, the curve in the road where deer always crossed. It felt like time had frozen. I half expected everything to look exactly as I left it. And for a while, it did. Until it didn't. The first thing I noticed was the road. It wasn't gravel anymore. It was paved, wide, freshly sealed, with painted lines and a streetlight at the corner. That was strange. Then came the archway. An actual brick archway, with landscaping rocks, decorative bushes, and a wooden sign that read, "Welcome to Hollow Creek Estates, a modern HOA community." I pulled over and just stared. Hollow Creek? There had never been a Hollow Creek before. That name didn't exist the last time I was here. I checked my phone twice, thinking maybe I'd turned onto the wrong road. But the GPS said otherwise. I eased back onto the street and drove under the arch. It felt surreal. There were streetlights now, curbs, sidewalks, shiny black mailboxes lined up like soldiers. Every few feet, there was a sapling tree with a mulch circle at its base. The transformation was complete and jarring. Then I saw the houses, 4 finished, 2 under construction, all of them craftsman style, 2-story builds with big windows and wide porches, brand new, untouched by weather, still smelling of paint and sawdust. And they were sitting directly on my land. I recognized the orientation immediately. One driveway lined up with what I knew was the northern boundary of my parcel. A cul-de-sac now occupied the spot where I used to park when visiting. The tree line was gone. The gully had been filled and leveled. My stakes, my survey markers, gone without a trace. I pulled to the side and shut off the engine. My heart was pounding in my ears. A man in a neon vest and hard hat emerged from a house frame, clipboard in hand. He was mid-conversation with another worker, but paused when he saw me. "You looking for someone?" he asked, friendly but firm. "This is my land," I replied. I didn't yell, didn't flinch, just said it. He furrowed his brow, glanced back at the clipboard, then shrugged. "You mean, like, you're moving in? Which lot?" "No, I own this land, all of it. I bought it outright. It's mine." That changed his tone. He flipped his clipboard, scanned a page, then looked at me sideways. "This is Hollow Creek Phase 1. You sure you're not on the wrong street?" "I'm sure. I have the deed. I've got title insurance. This land was never part of any subdivision." He gave me a tight-lipped nod, the kind you give when you think someone might be confused or worse. A problem. "Well, all I know is what's on the plat. This area's already recorded. You'll need to talk to the HOA if you've got an issue." I asked him if there was a Lot 27. That was the number assigned internally to my property on the old tax maps. He shook his head. "No Lot 27 here. These are lots 1 through 20. Phase two's going in behind those woods. He pointed toward the back. I asked him if he was aware of a meets and bounds description, bearings and distances, iron pins. Now he looked genuinely lost. That's survey stuff. I just build where they tell me. I didn't blame him. He wasn't the one who made the decision to pave over private land, but he was the first human barrier between me and the truth. I got back in the car and drove, not home, but straight to the county recorder's office. It was a long afternoon. I pulled every document I had. My deed, my title insurance policy, my original survey, my tax records. I sat with a clerk for over 2 hours, requesting public plats, subdivision approvals, anything related to Hollow Creek. And that's when it clicked. The developer had purchased land next to mine. That part was legitimate. But the subdivision plat they recorded didn't match the real property lines. One corner, just one, had been adjusted by about 15 feet. On paper, it looked small. On land, it was catastrophic. That 15-foot shift dragged the subdivision grid right over my parcel. Every house built in that strip was technically on my land, and the county had approved the plat with zero physical verification. No site visit, no confirmation, just a rubber stamp based on paper filings. I wasn't in the system, not flagged, not notified. No one ever questioned it because, to them, nothing was wrong. I looked at the new plat map. My lot wasn't even labeled anymore. It had been swallowed, renamed, renumbered, and paved over without a single conversation. I asked the clerk if there had been any mailed notices during the plat review. She shrugged. They usually go to the tax address on file. Mine had been forwarded while I was overseas. Most likely, they were thrown out with the junk mail. I sat there in stunned silence. Then I opened Google Maps, zoomed in, switched to satellite. The houses were visible, not just one or two. All of them. There was no doubt. I looked again at the boundaries, the old pins, the tree line I remembered so vividly. My land had been consumed, piece by piece, nail by nail, brick by brick. And nobody had said a word. There wasn't just a mistake. There was a theft. And now, someone would have to pay for that. I didn't sleep that night. I laid in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the drive, the sign, the houses, the blank look on the worker's face. My land, my quiet piece of the world, had been paved over, landscaped, and sold off like I didn't exist. And maybe, on paper, I didn't. By morning, I had a list. A real list. Not a plan. Not yet. Just the pieces I needed to confirm. I needed to prove 3 things. That I still legally owned the land, that the plat had overlapped my parcel, and that the developer had filed their version after my deed was already recorded. I started with the documents I already had. The deed, the survey, the title insurance policy. I made color copies. I printed off satellite views from before and after the subdivision work. Then I dug through my emails and found old photos Jerry had sent. There it was. My north boundary stake, right where one of the new driveways now sat. Next, I went to the county GIS office. The map layers were clunky, but once the technician pulled the historical parcel boundaries, everything clicked. My original lot was still there. Recorded, assigned a parcel ID, taxed and paid in full. But the current HOA plat completely overlapped it. So, this line, I said, pointing to the GIS overlay, shouldn't be here? She squinted. Not unless the boundary was redrawn. Was it? She checked. No boundary line adjustment application on file. Nothing recorded under your name either. So how did they get approval to build over it? She shrugged. Probably filed it under their acquisition parcel. If no one disputes it, It gets rubber stamped. I blinked. So they never had to verify it physically? Not unless someone complains. The office is paper-based. If it looks fine on a plat map, they approve it. There it was. They filed a plat that stole land, mine, and the county never even set foot outside the building before approving it. I called the title company next, the same one I'd used when I bought the land. I got transferred 3 times before someone agreed to meet in person. The rep was polite but cagey. She reviewed my file, scanned my documents, and quietly whistled when I showed her the overlay of the new subdivision. "They built on top of your meets and bounds," she said, "straight through it." She leaned back. "That's bold." "Do I have a claim?" She nodded slowly. "You've got a recorded deed. They don't. We insured your title. If you didn't sell or convey it, then yeah, you're the legal owner. You'll want to talk to a real estate attorney." The last thing she said stuck with me. "We've seen encroachments, fences, a garage corner, maybe. But this is surgical. It's like they knew exactly where to push." I did just that. I found an attorney with experience in property litigation and set a meeting for the next day. His name was Fields, mid-40s, sharp eyes, casual suit, and the kind of handshake that says, "I fight clean but hard." He listened while I laid everything out. I gave him the plat overlays, photos, GIS prints, even a thumb drive with PDFs of all my documents. When I finished, he sat still for a beat. Then he said, "This isn't a mistake. It's a strategy." I didn't say anything. "They didn't forget your parcel. They absorbed it. On purpose. The plat isn't an accident. It's engineered to swallow your boundaries with just enough ambiguity to argue they didn't know." "But I recorded everything. I paid the taxes. It's mine." "It is. But their defense will hinge on 2 things: that they didn't have notice of your claim, and that your legal description was too vague to trigger a title conflict." I showed him the original deed, the bearings, the distances, the iron pins, the plat map. "Does this look vague to you?" He smiled. "To me? No. To a jury? We'll make sure they understand it's rock solid." He laid out the options. I could sue for quiet title, to affirm ownership. I could also sue for trespass and ejectment, to physically remove the structures. And, if we waited and let construction continue, the case would become stronger. The damages would rise. The cost of undoing the trespass would be on them. "What's your goal?" he asked. "I want them gone. I want them to feel what it's like when someone pretends your rights don't exist." "Then let them finish," he said. It felt counterintuitive, but it made legal sense. The more they built, the deeper the trespass, and the greater my leverage. Once houses were sold, their position would be indefensible. Because then, they weren't just wrong, they were reckless. We filed nothing. Not yet, instead, I documented. Every day I drove by, took photos from public right-of-ways, captured time-stamped images of the homes, the signs, the contractor trucks. I saved screenshots of online listings, the ones showing Lot 12, Lot 13, all located squarely on my parcel. I created a file called Evidence Stack and organized everything by date. I even returned to the original site with a surveyor. He brought a GPS unit and a printout of the old legal description. After an hour of walking the property and matching up distances, he stopped near a mulched corner and said, "You see this?" He knelt down and brushed back the mulch. There it was, an old iron pin, just as described in the deed. "To the inch," he said. "You're dead right. This is your land." I took pictures. Then I took a deep breath. The strategy was risky, but airtight. Let them finish. Let them build. Let them close deals. Dig foundations. poor driveways, all on top of a trespass. Because the deeper they went, the harder they'd fall. I became a ghost on my own land. Not unseen, just unnoticed. I didn't confront anyone, didn't make a scene. I drove past the construction site a few times a week, sometimes more, always from a public right-of-way, always with a camera. They didn't see a threat, just another local checking out the new homes. What they didn't see was the zoom lens I used to capture foundation pours, delivery trucks, and contractor signs, or the license plates I recorded, or the screenshots I saved from their website. Listings for houses sitting squarely on my parcel, advertised as move-in ready with premium placement. It was hard to stay silent. Every instinct in me screamed to act. But Fields had been clear. Let them hang their own liability. So I did. I made folders. I time-stamped everything. I printed and annotated builder floor plans from their brochures, highlighting which model was placed on which lot. My lot, I marked where their marketing materials contradicted public records. I downloaded copies of zoning requests, builder permits, and waterline approvals. All of it was public record. All of it showed one thing. They were building on land they didn't own. Every week, new pieces went up, siding, roofing, windows. It was like watching your memories be erased in slow motion. The tree line where I'd watched the sunset now stood behind a row of French doors. The gully I'd once called a quiet place was replaced by a concrete patio and a children's playset. They didn't just build on my land, they lived on it. The first open house sign made my stomach turn. I parked across the street and walked the sidewalk, smiled at the realtor, picked up a flyer. She asked if I was looking to buy. I said, maybe. Inside, everything smelled of fresh paint and marketing lies, staged furniture, generic artwork, bowls of lemons on quartz countertops. It was sterile and hollow, and none of it should have existed. I left with a brochure and 3 pictures, one of the lot number sign, one of the living room window facing west, and one of the backyard fence line that cut through my original stake. Jerry hadn't returned any calls. I started to worry something had happened to him. I later found out he'd moved unexpectedly. Medical issues, they said. No forwarding address. I was alone now, but I had the facts. 1 week later, I filed the quiet title complaint. The lawsuit named the developer, the shell company that recorded the plat, and the HOA entity itself, which was still under developer control. We included a claim for trespass and a request for ejectment, which meant removal of the structures. Not just payment, not just negotiation, removal. Fields also recorded a lis pendens, a legal notice to the world that this property was under litigation. It was subtle, just a filing with the county, but the effect was immediate. 2 homes went off-market within 48 hours. Listings disappeared. One local title company called Fields to confirm the case status and refused to ensure further transactions in the subdivision. That's when the emails started, first from the HOA board, then from a generic developer address. The tone was firm, dismissive. We believe your claim lacks merit. We have no record of your ownership. The plat was legally approved. Then came the accusation, your deed is vague. The legal description lacks sufficient specificity to establish an adverse claim. That's when Fields smiled. They're bluffing, he said, trying to scare you into folding. We responded with hard copies of the original survey, the GPS-confirmed PIN locations, and a breakdown of the chain of title. Fields didn't just send it to them. He sent it to their attorneys, the County Land Commission, and every title company that had touched a transaction in the subdivision. We weren't bluffing. We had receipts. One builder responded by calling the lawsuit slanderous. The HOA president called me a bad faith squatter in a community forum post, which I screenshotted. The post accused me of harassing homeowners and disrupting neighborhood unity. I hadn't even spoken to a single neighbor, another developer entity, a shell LLC based out of a different state, filed a counterclaim for adverse possession, stating that they had acted in good faith reliance on public records. Fields laughed out loud in the office when he read it. Adverse possession? With recorded title and ongoing tax payments? Good luck. Still, we knew this meant war. We amended the complaint to include slander of title and fraudulent inducement, claims tied to their public misrepresentations and marketing materials. We cited their own brochures as evidence that they had marketed land they did not own. We also cited their building permits, which were issued under parcel numbers not tied to valid ownership. This wasn't an error anymore. This was systemic. The final blow came when Fields sent a discovery request for internal communications between the developer, the HOA board, and the surveyor. We wanted everything: email chains, meeting notes, plat drafts. That same week, construction slowed. 2 of the remaining homes halted mid-frame. Crews left for lunch and didn't return. One builder website pulled the entire Phase 1 section offline. We hadn't even had a court date yet. Then came the whisper offers. Real estate agents called Fields directly. One asked if we'd consider a private easement in exchange for monthly HOA fee waivers. Another offered to gift back a different lot in the subdivision, one the developer still owned. They didn't understand. This wasn't about swapping rectangles on a map. This was about justice. The day after that, a man knocked on my door. He was wearing a blazer, no tie, calm demeanor, introduced himself as a representative of the development group. He asked if we could talk off the record. I let him speak. He offered a settlement. It was low, barely covered the original purchase price. He said they wanted to avoid an ugly dispute. He called it a miscommunication. He asked what it would take to make this all go away. I told him he could leave. I didn't want a payout. I wanted accountability. Let them build, Fields had said, and we did. Now they were stuck. The deeper the foundation, the deeper the fault. The day the lawsuit hit the docket, everything changed. For months, I had watched in silence, collecting, documenting, waiting. But once the case was filed and the lease pendants recorded, the developer couldn't ignore it anymore. The legal system now had its spotlight pointed straight at them. At first, the reaction was confusion. Then came the panic. The lease pendants wasn't flashy, just a few lines of legal text recorded with the county clerk. But in real estate, those lines were toxic. The document attached itself to the title of every affected lot in the subdivision, sending a signal to every title company, lender, and buyer. This land is in dispute. Proceed at your own risk. Fields had explained it like putting a red flag in the soil. You're telling the world, don't touch this. It's not clean. And the world listened. Within a week, 3 pending sales were frozen. One buyer walked away entirely. The title company refused to close, citing clouded title. The other 2 homes were quietly pulled from listings. The developer's marketing team scrubbed Phase 1 language from their site. Their Instagram page, once filled with polished home tours and upbeat captions, went silent. Then the lawyers came out swinging. Their first filing was a motion to dismiss. Standard stuff. They claimed I lacked standing, that the legal description was inadequate, and that my claims were speculative. It was legal spaghetti. Throw everything at the wall, hope something sticks. Fields responded in kind. With calm, brutal clarity, he filed our reply. Point-by-point rebuttals, attached survey maps, GPS-confirmed coordinates, the original deed, photos of the original iron pins, and aerial overlays showing the progression of the trespass. We also included an affidavit from the licensed surveyor who found the original property corners under the mulch beds of house number 3. His statement was simple. This structure was built within the bounds of a previously recorded parcel. No boundary adjustment was filed. This constitutes a physical trespass. The court didn't dismiss the case. That's when the gloves came off. The HOA president, still a puppet of the developer, began emailing homeowners claiming I was attempting to sabotage the neighborhood and threaten property values. She hosted an emergency Zoom meeting, inviting all residents to learn the truth. I joined the call, muted, camera off. For 30 minutes, I listened to the spin. They called me a hostile outsider, claimed I was exploiting a clerical mistake to shake down hard-working families, that I was weaponizing legal technicalities to force concessions. One homeowner asked the president directly, "But did we actually build on someone else's land?" The president hesitated, just long enough to be telling, and then said, "We believe the developer's records are valid and appropriately filed." That wasn't a no. After the meeting, Fields received a letter from their counsel, more aggressive now. They offered a modest settlement, claiming it was in the interest of community harmony. It didn't even cover the cost of my legal fees. We declined. Then came the counterclaim, a full-throated assertion of adverse possession, constructive notice, and developer good faith. They argued that because I hadn't been physically present on the land, and because the subdivision plat had been publicly filed, they had assumed it was uncontested. Fields grinned when he read it. "This is great," he said. "They just admitted they never checked the actual title." Our case was no longer just a boundary dispute. It was a referendum on how careless you can be when developing someone else's land. As pretrial motions flew back and forth, more evidence surfaced. Internal emails from the builder, obtained through subpoena, showed they had been aware of a possible discrepancy early on. One project manager even wrote, "We'll just push the corner slightly. County never checks." That became Exhibit A. Next came the depositions. The developer's land planner squirmed under questioning. Fields asked if they'd ever verified the ownership of the parcel marked Lot 12. The man fumbled. "We trusted the plat." "Did you request a title search?" "No." "Did you contact the owner listed on county tax rolls?" "We assumed it had been purchased." It hadn't. I still paid the taxes, every year. Another deposition revealed that the architectural firm was warned by their junior surveyor that the pin locations might not align with the recorded parcel. That warning was ignored. We filed a motion for partial summary judgment, asking the court to declare, before trial, that the title to the land was mine, and always had been. It wasn't the whole case, just the ownership piece. It took weeks, but the court issued its ruling. The plaintiff holds superior title to the parcel in question. Defendant's plat does not convey ownership, nor does it invalidate the prior recorded deed. Possession and use of said land constitutes a continuing trespass. The judge didn't stop there. He warned both parties that further construction activity on the disputed area would be viewed as bad faith. The court has little patience for willful ignorance of recorded boundaries. That alone should have ended it, but it didn't. The developer continued work on the adjacent lots, areas not directly in dispute, but clearly tied to the flawed plat. They rushed to finish homes, racing against a legal clock. Then, one of the 4 trespassing homes closed, despite the lis pendens. Despite the ruling, the title company pushed it through using a legal workaround, ensuring over the dispute by referencing only the HOA plat, and not my deed. It was a massive gamble, one that would soon explode. The new homeowners were a young couple, newlyweds. I didn't blame them. They had no idea. But when they got served, noticed that their new home sat on land they didn't legally own. Their fury was volcanic. They filed their own lawsuit, not against me, against the developer, the HOA, and the title company. Fraud, negligent misrepresentation, and failure to disclose, that turned the tide. Local media picked up the story. Homeowner shocked to learn house built on someone else's land. Photos of the house, a copy of my survey, a blurred-out image of the judge's ruling. Suddenly, I wasn't a nameless adversary. I was a wronged property owner protecting my rights. Public opinion turned fast. The HOA board, sensing trouble, held another meeting. This time, homeowners demanded accountability. One man asked if their dues were being used to defend the developer in court. Another asked if the board had ever verified the legality of the plat. No answers came. Behind the scenes, the developer's attorneys reached out again. A new offer, higher this time. It included a large payment, plus a permanent easement. Fields didn't even blink. No deal. We weren't interested in compromise anymore. We were building a case the right way, brick by brick. Just like they built on my land, what started as a legal skirmish exploded into a public spectacle. The article about the wrongly built house spread faster than I expected. Local outlets picked it up first, then regional news. Within days, I got a call from a national real estate blog. Their headline, "Built to Fail. When Homes Are Built on Stolen Land." It included drone footage, overlays of plat maps, and a timeline of the dispute. The comments section was brutal. Most aimed not at me, but at the developer, the county, and the HOA. Suddenly, I wasn't the villain. I was the warning. More buyers backed out. Title companies refused to touch anything connected to the HOA plat. Even unaffected phases of the subdivision were now contaminated by association. One firm blacklisted the entire developer group, issuing an internal memo that read, "Due to litigation risk and demonstrated boundary irregularities, no title insurance is to be offered for any related parcels." The HOA board scrambled. Their emergency meeting, called within days of the media release, was chaos. Angry homeowners demanded answers. Many had never been told about the lis pendens, the lawsuit, or the risk to their titles. One woman cried openly on the video call. Her home was 3 doors down from one of the contested structures. She asked if her mortgage could be impacted. The HOA president deflected. When pressed about the original land acquisition, she said, "We trusted the developer." Someone else shouted, "That's not a defense, that's negligence." The next day, my attorney, Fields, received notice that the homeowners were organizing a class action. Not against me, but against the developer and the title company. Their claim, fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. It snowballed from there. 2 real estate agents quit working with the subdivision, citing reputational risk. A civil engineering firm withdrew its name from future development permits. Local banks stopped issuing mortgages on the street. And still, the developer pretended to act surprised. Their counsel sent another offer. It was much higher now. A full cash buyout, triple my original purchase price, plus a signed agreement not to discuss the outcome publicly. We refused. I didn't want money. I wanted a courtroom. The judge called a status conference to discuss case progress. Both sides were ordered to attend in person. It was the first time I saw the developer's lead team face to face. They arrived in tailored suits and forced smiles, carrying thick binders. Fields and I brought one folder, our evidence stack, now over 300 pages deep. The judge didn't waste time. He opened with, "I warned you not to build further. You ignored me." Their attorney tried to argue that they'd acted in reliance on the plat. The judge cut him off. "A plat doesn't transfer ownership," he said. "You knew that. Your client knew that. And yet, you poured concrete." The developer's representative leaned forward. "We were operating in good faith." "No," the judge said. "You were gambling on silence, and now you've lost." He announced the court's intention to schedule the ejectment trial within 60 days. Until then, all activity on the disputed land was to cease. Period. No sales, no marketing, no landscaping, no maintenance. The HOA's lawyer asked for an exception to allow common area mowing and trash pickup. The judge agreed, but added, "No tampering with boundaries, no removal of markers. I don't want so much as a bush relocated without consent." When we left that day, Fields turned to me in the parking lot. "They're done. They just don't know it yet." We were right. Weeks later, I got a knock on my door again. Not a developer this time, a process server. The HOA was accusing me of defamation and slander. For what? For being quoted in the newspaper. For sharing court filings, public records, on a local forum. For answering questions from nervous homeowners when they asked what was happening. Fields filed a countersuit the same day. We argued abuse of process, malicious prosecution, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. It wasn't just baseless. It was retaliation. The HOA president had used her authority not to protect homeowners, but to shield the developer. Then something remarkable happened. A member of the HOA board resigned, publicly. In a letter circulated to every mailbox in the subdivision, he wrote, "I cannot, in good conscience, continue to represent a board that has failed in its duty to its members. We have not only misled homeowners, we've actively participated in covering up a foundational error." That letter was Exhibit B in our response. By now, the media had circled back. The second round of articles was worse for the developer. One headline read, "HOA implodes after building on wrong land." Another called it, "The collapse of confidence." The HOA tried to raise emergency funds through a special assessment. Homeowners revolted. The proposal was rejected by a 72% margin. That same week, a new problem surfaced for the developer. Bankruptcy filings, one of their LLCs, the shell used to process construction contracts, filed Chapter 11. But it didn't matter. Fields had already anticipated this. Months earlier, he'd filed joint liability claims that tied every related entity to the dispute. The bankruptcy wouldn't protect them. We filed a motion for summary judgment on trespass and ejectment. Our evidence was airtight. The structures weren't partially over the line. They were entirely within the parcel. Not an inch of doubt. The hearing was quick. The judge reviewed the filings, heard brief arguments, then ruled, "The court finds in favor of the plaintiff, the trespass is established, the structures must be removed." The defense pleaded for reconsideration. The judge refused. They filed a motion for emergency stay, citing the hardship to homeowners. The judge paused, looked at them, and said, "Did you think about their hardship before you built on land you didn't own?" He granted a short grace period, 30 days, to allow affected residents to vacate. And then it was done. Ejectment ordered. Demolition inevitable. The HOA crumbled. Their president resigned. Their attorney quit. The developer ghosted the community. Their website replaced with a bland under-maintenance message. Homeowners banded together to elect a new board, one that promised transparency and accountability. It was a hollow victory for some, especially those who had bought homes on stolen soil. But for me, it was a vindication. Every sleepless night, every photocopy, every photo taken from a distance, all of it mattered. And the fallout wasn't just legal, it was cultural. Real estate offices in the region held workshops on plat verification. Surveyors added disclaimers to their reports. County officials rewrote internal guidelines, requiring double checks for overlapping parcels. All because someone thought no one would notice. But I did, and I made sure the world did too. I got there before sunrise. The air was cool, still, a heavy kind of quiet. The kind that comes before something irreversible. I parked across from the cul-de-sac, where 4 houses stood like monuments to arrogance. Lights were still on in a few windows. The last of the occupants had until midnight, and from what I heard, they all left with hours to spare. By 7 a.m., the street was lined with news vans and curious neighbors. Some brought coffee, some brought lawn chairs. A few looked ashamed to be there, but they stayed anyway. It wasn't just demolition, it was a reckoning. A deputy arrived to secure the site. Then came the demolition crew. Hard hats, neon vests, a flatbed with an excavator chained to the back. One of the workers asked the foreman if this was really happening. He nodded. Court orders taped to the mailbox. Reporters circled like birds. A journalist from the regional paper asked me for a quote. I declined. Another asked if I was nervous. I said, "Not anymore." The deputy approached the HOA president, who had shown up minutes before in a tan coat and oversized sunglasses. She was already arguing with the foreman. Something about property rights, about making a mistake. She pointed at me and said, "You didn't have to do this." It was the only time I responded to her, in person, with a full sentence. "You could have checked a map." The foreman raised a hand. Engines roared to life. The excavator lifted its boom, swung slowly over the roof of the nearest house, the one with the sunroom that used to face my gully, and dropped the claw like a judge's gavel. Shingles crumbled. Rafters splintered. The front of the house folded inward like a broken toy. People gasped. The HOA president turned away. She muttered something about monstrosity and walked off. A few reporters followed her down the street, but most stayed, watching, documenting, processing what it looks like when legal fiction meets physical reality. It wasn't fast. The crew took care not to damage surrounding infrastructure. They moved deliberately, house by house, slab by slab. What had taken months to build came down in hours. By noon, only rubble remained. I walked to the edge of the lot. The land was raw again, exposed. And there, half buried beneath a pile of insulation and rotted subflooring, was something familiar. A rusted iron pin, my corner marker, still in place. I asked one of the crew if I could retrieve it. He helped me dig it out. I held it for a long moment, ran my thumb over the notch. Proof that the land never lied. Only people did. The media frenzy died down after the second house. By the time the fourth came down, only a few remained. One was a man holding a "Justice Served" sign. Another was a woman with tears in her eyes. She used to walk her dog past this street. She told me she bought in the second phase, down the hill. She said she was sorry I had to go through all this. I thanked her, then I watched the last wall fall. Silence followed, just the hum of diesel engines cooling, the distant crackle of a radio, and a gust of wind that swept drywall dust across the pavement like ash. The lots were scraped, leveled, seeded with straw. No one would ever know what had stood there, unless they remembered, or unless someone told them. I would. That evening, Fields and I sat in his office, reviewing the last pieces of paperwork. The court order had been fulfilled, the ruling satisfied, and the county had already updated their parcel maps to reflect the original boundary. It was done, but the effects rippled outward. The developer's umbrella company filed for bankruptcy within weeks. The title company reached a multi-million-dollar settlement with the class action group. The HOA formally voted to dissolve, citing insolvency and lack of quorum. A special master was appointed to unwind the legal knots left behind. Every buyer got compensated. Some walked away with damages. Some just walked away. Me? I got my land back. More importantly, I got to keep what mattered. The silence, the space, the promise I made to myself and to my grandmother. She would have said the place looked lonely now. Maybe it did, but it was honest again, the way it had always been meant to be. I stood on the edge of the gully one evening, a few weeks later. The sky was painted in those familiar gold and orange tones. The air was clean. The boundary pins had been resurveyed and flagged with fresh markers. A new sign had been posted at the front of the lot. Private property. No trespassing. I sipped coffee from her old mug and felt a strange sense of peace. Not happiness, exactly, but relief. Like finishing a long race you never wanted to run. The land wasn't just dirt. It was memory. It was proof that not everything could be rewritten with a permit and a plat. As I turned to leave, I noticed someone had placed a note in a sandwich bag at the edge of the straw-covered lot. I picked it up. It said, "I didn't know. I'm sorry." No name. Just handwriting. Shaky, but sincere. I folded the note and kept it. Not for forgiveness, but because it was the first time someone from that side had acknowledged the truth. That they built on land that wasn't theirs. That they lost not because of red tape, but because they refused to listen. Because they refused to care, the lawsuits didn't end with the demolition. They intensified. The buyers of the one home that had closed before the lis pendens sued everyone: the developer, the HOA, the builder, and the title company. Their case alleged fraud, negligent misrepresentation, and breach of contract. Their attorney even contacted me for a sworn affidavit. I provided one, just the facts, attached with survey exhibits and photos from the day I first returned to find homes on my land. Their case settled quietly. For more than the purchase price, I watched from a distance as the dominoes continued to fall. The county began a full audit of recent plat filings, and 2 planning staffers were reassigned after the internal review. One resigned. The county issued new guidelines for development plat approval, now requiring secondary title confirmation before maps could be filed. A policy born from negligence, from my story. Field's office started getting inquiries from other landowners. People who suddenly realized that someone else's fence, garage, or even patio might be intruding on their deeds. The term boundary confidence entered the local vocabulary. What used to be taken for granted was now a legal minefield. The real estate community adapted, slowly, then all at once. Agents began attaching full survey packets to every listing. Surveyors now included cautionary clauses in all reports. Banks quietly circulated internal memos advising underwriters to avoid subdivisions developed by the same shell entities tied to my case. I became an example, not just a person, but a precedent, and the legal victories kept coming. In court, Fields secured a full award of costs. Every dime I spent, from legal fees to document filings to private survey verification, was reimbursed. The judge ruled that the developer's actions showed reckless disregard for clearly recorded interests. The phrase became a headline on 2 legal blogs and was cited in a continuing education course for real estate attorneys. We also got injunctive relief that barred the developer and any entity associated with its officers from filing plat maps in the county for the next 5 years without judicial oversight. It wasn't just a win, it was a sentence. The HOA, meanwhile, collapsed under its own weight. The new board, elected after the prior resignations, attempted to maintain basic services, mowing, lighting, drainage, but the budget was depleted, with no developer funding and most homeowners unwilling to pay special assessments. The HOA voted to dissolve. That required court approval too, which it eventually got. A special master was appointed to oversee the wind-down. He contacted me directly at one point, confirming the parcel map revisions and the final discharge of all liens connected to the bogus plat. He seemed relieved that I was cooperative, even gracious. I told him, I just want the truth to stay on paper this time. When the dust finally settled, I had everything I started with, plus a few more things I hadn't expected. One was the deed, now laminated, framed, and mounted on the wall of my study. Another was the iron pin I dug out during demolition, cleaned, polished, and resting on my bookshelf beside my grandmother's coffee mug. And then there was the letter, the one in the plastic bag, left anonymously at the edge of the lot. I never found out who wrote it. But sometimes I wonder if it was the young couple who bought one of the finished homes, or maybe a contractor, or even a neighbor who realized what had happened too late. I didn't need their name. The gesture was enough. Sometimes justice doesn't look like a courtroom. Sometimes it's not about money or punishment. Sometimes it's a moment of recognition. Someone saying, "You were right. I was wrong." That's enough. The land healed slowly. Straw gave way to green again. Weeds reclaimed the edges. I left it untouched. For now, I didn't rush to build, didn't dig, didn't fence. I just visited, walked, sat, thought. Sometimes I'd bring a chair and a thermos and just listen to the wind. The quiet was different now. Heavier, more complex, not pure, but earned. I remembered what my grandmother said, about hearing yourself think, about dreams not meant to sit idle. This place was a dream once, then a battleground. Now it was something in between. A story etched in soil and cement dust. One afternoon, a law student reached out. He was researching property law for a class and had found my case. He asked if he could interview me. I said yes. He asked what I would have done differently. I paused, then told him. Maybe I would have paid a visit sooner. But even then, this was going to happen. Because they didn't care who the land belonged to. They only cared that it was convenient to take. That, I told him, is what you fight against. You don't just defend land. You defend the idea that records matter, that boundaries count, that ownership, when properly documented, isn't optional. It's a right. The student asked what I plan to do with the land now. I didn't have an answer then. I still don't. But I know I'll never sell it. It's more than acreage, more than lines on a map. It's the place where I proved something. Not just to the developer, or the court, or the neighbors, but to myself. That I could stand alone. That I could push back. That when the system tried to pretend I didn't exist, I made them remember. This chapter may be over. But the story, the warning, the lesson, will echo in contracts and closings and courtroom lectures for years. They built houses on my land, and I took them down. Not with force, not with threats, but with the truth, with the law, with patience, with strategy. I won't build anything there for a while, but I might plant something, maybe a tree, where the old marker stood, something slow to grow, deep to root, honest, like the land itself. And one day, if someone walks by and asks why there's only one tree in the middle of that open space, I'll tell them. Because that tree stands where 6 houses once stood, and none of them belonged there. The land story wasn't the only time I watched people suffer because someone in power didn't care enough to do the right thing. Years earlier, I worked at a retirement village, a modest place in a quiet Australian suburb, nestled between a public park and a small grocery store. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, and it mattered. Most of the residents had no one left, just staff and other old souls drifting through time together. One of those residents was Sam. Sam was gentle, funny, a bit forgetful, and always wore suspenders that didn't quite match anything. He loved crossword puzzles and had a soft spot for jelly candies. He'd been a teacher in his younger years. You could still hear it in the way he spoke. Clear, patient, every word deliberate. He also had family, 2 kids, grown adults, 1 son, 1 daughter-in-law. They held Sam's power of attorney: financial, medical, and legal. In theory, they were supposed to take care of him. In practice, they were ghosts: no visits, no calls, no birthday cards, just invoices, paid late, and excuses. We did our best. The staff was tight-knit and protective. Sam never went without meals or conversation. But he did go without other things: decent clothes, properly fitted shoes, the little items that required family approval. He once mentioned that his good wristwatch, a retirement gift, had gone missing after a rare visit from his son. I couldn't prove anything, but I believed him. Every December, the village hosted a Christmas Day lunch. The big one. Families could book in advance, attend a full catered meal, and spend time with their loved ones. It was tradition. We published a flyer every year: time, menu, seating chart, and one particular note, always bolded: "Please bring a jumper. The AC will be running cold due to outdoor foot traffic." It was Australia. Christmas wasn't snowy. It was 30 degrees, sunny, and humid. But inside the dining hall? Arctic. We had to crank the air to compensate for open doors, crowded hallways, and the warm bodies of 200 people milling around. So we warned them. Every single year, Sam's family, true to form, didn't RSVP. Then, on the day of the event, they showed up unannounced. No booking, no jumper. The front desk called me. I found them hovering near the entrance, wearing dress shirts and forced smiles. "We're here for Sam," the son said. "We didn't expect you," I replied. "He's already seated." They looked surprised, as if the idea of Sam having plans without them offended them. I walked them to his table. Sam lit up like a Christmas tree. He stood, hugged them both, then sat down with that little chuckle he did when he was happy, but nervous. I had prepped Sam that morning, gave him one of our donated sweaters, a thick, cozy number with big wooden buttons. I even tied his bow tie for him. He looked sharp. His son, meanwhile, was already complaining. "Why is it so cold in here?" he asked. "We published a note," I replied, pointing to the placard still taped to the front of every table tent. "The AC is necessary. We asked families to dress accordingly." "Well, we didn't see that. We assumed you weren't coming." They frowned. Sam just smiled and offered them ginger ale. They declined, so I made a decision. A quiet one. They had shown up late, unprepared and entitled. Again, they had ignored every message, every opportunity to contribute. And now they were disrupting Sam's day. A day meant for joy. So I went to the maintenance room, and I turned the AC colder. Not a lot, just 4 degrees, from 23 to 16 degrees, enough to shift from chilly to brisk. I returned to the dining hall and watched from the serving station. Within 15 minutes, Sam's daughter-in-law had wrapped napkins around her forearms. The son started bouncing his leg, clearly irritated. They whispered, stared daggers at the ceiling vents, shifted in their chairs. Meanwhile, Sam was having a ball. He laughed at the jokes. He ate every bite. He even got seconds on dessert. After another 10 minutes, the family stood up. "We're heading off," the son said loudly. Sam looked confused. Already? We've got other stops. They left in a huff. I walked over, checked on Sam. Too cold for them? He asked, smiling just a bit. Maybe just enough, I said. He nodded. It's nice in here. Reminds me of the school library in winter. After the meal, Sam stayed for the group carols. Then he took a nap in the rec room, sweater still on, hands folded over his belly, like a man finally at ease. That was his last Christmas. He passed 3 months later, peacefully, in his sleep. The jumper we gave him? He wore it to bed almost every night afterward. The son called a week after the funeral. He wanted access to Sam's account, claimed there were unclaimed valuables. We directed him to the legal office and ended the call. I kept that year's table flyer. Sometimes malicious compliance isn't about revenge. It's about reminding people, with icy precision, that kindness has limits, that cruelty cloaked in obligation isn't family. It's fraud. And that sometimes justice wears a sweater and sings Christmas carols while the guilty shiver. If this story moved you, if it made you think twice about property rights, legal accountability, or just standing your ground, then do something simple but powerful. Hit that like button to show your support for stories that expose injustice and celebrate perseverance. Subscribe if you want more real-life narratives that combine legal battles, emotional stakes, and a hard-won sense of justice. We tell the stories others overlook. And if you've ever fought for what was yours, whether it was a piece of land, your dignity, or your voice, drop a comment. Your story matters too. Because when the system forgets who you are, sometimes the only way to remind them is to fight back.